Why did Jasmine force him to say a number he was desperately trying to avoid? Because the second those words left his mouth, his entire argument crumbled, and she knew exactly what she was doing. And before I show you how Jasmine Crockett trapped Representative Thompson with one brutal question that left him completely stammering in front of the entire Agriculture Committee, you absolutely need to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness is a complete masterclass in destroying political talking points with facts someone is fighting not to admit. Now, the House Agriculture Committee hearing room has this totally different vibe compared to the more famous committees like Judiciary or Oversight. This isn't where big constitutional battles happen. This is policy in the absolute weeds. Crop subsidies, conservation programs, nutrition assistance, farm bill debates. Massive legislation that affects everything from corn prices in Iowa all the way to food stamps in Philadelphia. Most of the time, these hearings are incredibly technical, super wonky, the kind of stuff that agriculture lobbyists watch obsessively, but that never even touches national news. But every once in a while, when the politics of food assistance slam into broader fights about government spending and who actually deserves help, these hearings explode into major flashpoints. And today was about to become one of those days. The committee was tearing into the Republican Farm Bill proposal, and you could cut the tension with a knife from the second opening statements began. Democrats were straight up accusing Republicans of burying massive cuts to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, what everyone still calls food stamps, behind technical language and budget accounting tricks that most people wouldn't catch. Republicans were firing back, insisting their bill was cost neutral, that they were just making the program more efficient, that any talk of cuts was pure Democratic fearmongering, designed to score cheap political points. Representative Glenn Thompson sat near the center of the Republican side, looking confident, looking prepared, looking like he owned the room. This Pennsylvania congressman had been on the Agriculture Committee for years, had actually chaired it during the last Republican majority, and he genuinely considered himself an absolute expert on farm policy and nutrition programs. He'd been one of the main architects behind this Republican Farm Bill proposal, and he'd spent the entire morning defending it with the smooth ease of someone who thought he understood the issues way better than any of his critics possibly could. Thompson had just wrapped up this whole statement about how the Republican proposal would actually strengthen SNAP for people who truly need it while cutting out waste and fraud. That's when Jasmine Crockett, sitting several seats down on the Democratic side, raised her hand for recognition. The committee chairman acknowledged her, looking slightly reluctant, like he could probably sense this wasn't about to be some friendly exchange. Crockett didn't warm up to it. She went straight for the throat. Mr. Thompson, I've been sitting here listening to you and your colleagues talk all morning about how your farm bill doesn't cut SNAP, how it's just about efficiency and integrity. But I'm looking right now at the Congressional Budget Office analysis of your proposal, and it's telling a very different story. So I have one simple question for you. According to CBO, how much does your bill reduce SNAP spending over 10 years? Thompson shifted in his seat, just slightly. The confidence flickered for half a second. Well, Congresswoman, the CBO score is based on certain assumptions. That's not what I asked. Crockett cut him off smoothly. I asked for the number. CBO analyzed your bill. They calculated the reduction in SNAP spending. What's the number? Thompson tried pivoting. The bill is designed to be cost neutral overall by reallocating resources. Mr. Thompson, Crockett's voice stayed patient but got firmer, like a teacher asking a student to answer the actual question instead of the one they wished had been asked. I'm not asking about overall cost neutrality. I'm asking specifically about SNAP, the CBO number. How much does your bill cut from SNAP over 10 years? The room started getting quieter. Other committee members were paying way closer attention now. You could feel the shift. Thompson looked over at the Republican staff director like he was desperately hoping for some procedural rescue. But nothing came. He was going to have to answer. The CBO projection shows a reduction of approximately $30 billion. $30 billion, Crockett repeated it, making absolutely sure everyone in that room heard it crystal clear. So when you've been saying all morning that there are no cuts to SNAP, what you actually mean is there's a $30 billion reduction, but you're just calling it something else. Is that accurate? Thompson's face started turning red. Congresswoman, you're mischaracterizing the policy. We're not cutting benefits for people who are truly eligible. You're cutting $30 billion from the program. Crockett said it flat, no emotion, just facts. That's not a characterization, that's math. CBO says your bill reduces SNAP spending by $30 billion over 10 years. That's a cut. You can dress it up with all the language you want about eligibility and efficiency, but the bottom line is $30 billion fewer dollars going to help people afford food. Why can't you just say that plainly? Thompson tried desperately to pivot back to his prepared talking points about work requirements and able-bodied adults, but Crockett wasn't about to let him escape that easily. Mr. Thompson, let me ask you something else. You represent Pennsylvania's 15th district, is that correct? Thompson nodded, looking weary now, clearly uncertain where this was going. Rural district, lots of small towns, some economically struggling areas. Crockett kept going. What percentage of your constituents rely on SNAP benefits? Do you know? Thompson hesitated. I'd have to look at the exact numbers. Let me help you out. Crockett pulled up data on her tablet. According to USDA statistics, approximately 14% of your district receives SNAP benefits. That's higher than the national average. In fact, rural districts like yours tend to have higher SNAP utilization rates than many urban districts. So, when you cut $30 billion from SNAP, you're cutting a program that disproportionately helps your own constituents. Does that seem like good representation to you? The Democratic side of the committee was getting energized now. You could see it. The Republican side looked straight up uncomfortable. Thompson was visibly struggling to come up with any response that didn't sound like he was actively arguing against helping his own district. Well, our bill includes provisions that help rural communities. Your bill cuts $30 billion from SNAP. Crockett repeated it again, refusing to let him change the subject. I'm not asking about other provisions. I'm asking about the specific impact of cutting food assistance when your district relies on that program more than most. How do you justify that to constituents who are going to lose benefits? Thompson tried another angle, one that Republicans always use when they get backed into corners on spending. Congresswoman, I appreciate your concern for fiscal responsibility. Perhaps you could explain how Democrats plan to address the massive national debt that programs like SNAP contribute to. It was a trap question, a clear attempt to paint Crockett and Democrats as fiscally reckless for opposing cuts. But Crockett had been waiting for exactly this deflection, and her response was absolutely devastating. Oh, you want to talk about the national debt? Let's talk about it, Mr. Thompson. How much did the national debt increase during the Trump administration? Thompson looked completely trapped. I don't have those figures in front of me. Let me help you again. Crockett's tone made it crystal clear she'd come prepared for exactly this line of argument. The national debt increased by approximately $8 trillion during the Trump administration. $8 trillion. And you voted for the policies that caused most of that increase. The tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefited the wealthy and corporations, the spending increases that weren't offset. You voted for all of that. So please don't lecture me about fiscal responsibility while you're trying to take food assistance away from struggling families in your own district to pay for tax cuts you gave to billionaires. The room erupted in murmurs. Several Democratic members were nodding hard. Republican members were urgently conferring with staff. And Thompson looked like he desperately wanted to be literally anywhere else on planet Earth. He tried to respond, something about different economic circumstances and necessary investments, but his voice had completely lost that confident authority it carried earlier. Crockett still wasn't finished. Here's what I don't understand, Mr. Thompson. When we're talking about tax cuts for the wealthy, fiscal responsibility doesn't seem to matter. When we're talking about defense spending increases, fiscal responsibility doesn't seem to matter. But when we're talking about helping people, particularly poor people, particularly people in rural areas that your party claims to represent, suddenly we need to find cuts. Suddenly $30 billion in food assistance is unaffordable. Why is that? Thompson tried arguing that the situations were different, that defense spending and tax policy couldn't be compared to nutrition assistance programs, but he was clearly on total defense now, speaking in fragments instead of complete arguments. Crockett had taken absolute control of this exchange. She pressed her advantage. Let me give you one more number to think about, Mr. Thompson. Do you know how much we spend annually on SNAP? Total program cost? Thompson shook his head slightly, clearly unwilling to guess after getting corrected on every previous number. It's about $80 billion annually, Crockett said it calmly. Sounds like a lot, right? But that's less than 1% of the federal budget. 1% to help feed 40 million Americans, including millions of children, elderly people, and disabled individuals. And you're telling me we can't afford that? But we can afford to add $8 trillion to the debt through tax cuts for people who are already wealthy? She leaned forward, and when she spoke again, her voice carried both moral force